Rabbi Adina Allen, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Really excited to have you on here. So excited to talk about your work and your book. And we're excited to have you up in Portland, which is happening. And I'll have a link in the show notes for folks who want to be able to register for that and learn more about that event. But we're just honored that you could make time for us. I do want to get to the nature of the work you do in JSP, the Jewish Studio Project, but I wanted to just begin. And I wanted to ask you this is maybe a strange way to phrase it, but help us understand what creativity is an answer to or a response to. In other words, what do you see happening in our world to which creativity is a response or an answer to you?
Like why we need
it. Yeah. Why have you centered your life in this moment and your work around creativity? What is it? What do you think it offers us that the world needs?
Yeah. Wow. Let's just get right into it. Around. I love it. I think that creativity, I think it's code word for God.
Cool.
And I think it gets used in these more like nicey nice or like unimportant ways, but I really think creativity is the source of our deepest power, and accessing our creativity is how we access that place where we and the divine or source or spirit or greater consciousness or whatever word you want to use there, where we access that thing, that feeling, that energy, that knowledge that is beyond the intellectual rational mind that wants to come into the world.
And I'll just say I love what you said about connecting it to divinity, because we comfortably, and you get into this in your book quite a bit, but we comfortably refer to God as the creator without even really connecting the dots. Like, okay, if we're made in the divine image, what does that mean? So yeah, but like, is there a social context? Is there a particular kind of fracturing or a breaking in the Jewish world or institutions or the broader world that you think makes the world in need of creativity at this moment, I guess?
For sure. A couple of things that come to mind. One is that quote that's, I think, normally attributed to Einstein, but I don't know if it technically was him, but that problems can't be solved at the same level of consciousness that created them.
Wow.
And so if we're continuing to apply the same level of consciousness to what we're experiencing, we're not going to evolve and get to the next level. And so I think that creative practice, accessing our creativity, is a way to move beyond that level that we're at and bring in the new things that want to come into the world. Also, and we can talk about this more when we get into the specific work, if we want to talk about that, we do at Jewish Studio Project, but being in creative practice, at least the way we offer it at Jewish Studio Project, alongside other people, I have found, especially in the last couple of years, that I think have seen even more intense fracturing and fragmentation among Jewish communities, is a generative way to be in shared space with other people where you don't have to have a shared consensual reality. And I think the more we...
Wait, hold on. Sorry, I want to slow you down. It's early, man. God, I thought I was starting heavy. I was like, this is only my second cup of coffee. Wait, say that again. The shared consent without having a shared consensual reality. Walk me through that a bit. That's a beautiful idea.
Yeah, I think, what I have seen and experienced in the communities that many communities that I'm a part of is the leader or people around you have to say things exactly the way that you want to hear them. And they have to have the shared view and the shared language and using these words and not that word or whatever. And we're all on a journey coming to understand what's happening. And we're all, in my theology, like a refraction of the divine. And so each of us are able to see and understand and process one part of what's happening. And it's an important part, but it's not the whole view. And I think we start to feel unsafe. We feel ungrounded if what being in community and being together is about having a shared consensual reality of what's happening. I think that's getting harder and harder. But my experience has been in doing creative practice alongside other people, I can be in community. I can feel connected and a part of something bigger and not alone. We know how loneliness is such an issue right now, but in a way that we don't have to all agree or be using this.
Wow, that is so powerful. The world is highly fractured. And so creativity can create this like shared ground without our having to resolve conflicts. We still may want to or need to resolve certain conflicts, but this gives us a grounding of unity. Wow, God, that's beautiful.
Can I say one more thing just about conflicts?
Yes, absolutely.
Which is, okay?
Only one though.
Only one, which is also that at least the type of creative process that we're doing, which is about, and we can talk about it, getting underneath the intellectual surface, trying to figure out like, what is really there for me? What is happening? What is this activation? What is this feeling? I think we jump really quickly to let's have dialogue across difference. Let's have a salon. Let's have a talk, a session, a panel, right? I remember I experienced this in rabbinical school around Israel-Palestine issues, right? It's like, let's do every single one of those things. And I felt I was experiencing for myself and seeing nothing's moving. No one feels closer. No one's views have shifted. And so I think what I feel excited about is creative practice as a spiritual technology that can allow each of us to kind of unstick the stuck places in ourselves, where there's blockage or activation, and come to understand that. So that then, right, we're in dialogue with ourselves first, so that then we can come to meet the other. And I think really quickly, especially in the Jewish world where community is such a value and is so important, which I agree with, we so quickly move to let's be together, let's talk about it. Right. And we haven't yet done the inner work to allow ourselves to show up.
I was a congregational rabbi for 14 years. So there's certainly, in my experience, there was beautiful moments of community, and yet it was always elusive. It was like, yeah, we were in the room together. Yes, there were older people and younger people, but it didn't really feel connected. And it strikes me that your focus on creativity gives people maybe like a theological language that they're not even necessarily thinking of as a theological language for really articulating really shared experience of unity that isn't going to happen just at like the Mahjong event or whatever.
Totally. And a unity that isn't like making everyone the same, right? That allows for all of the unique inherent differences, and that celebrates it. And that really you physically, right? If we're doing art, let's say 2D visual art, you're seeing it on the page in front of you. Like, wow, your inner world is completely different than mine, and yet we're all connected because. Yeah, I
think there's that gorgeous midrash. I might be making this up, but I don't think I am. Where at the Woman of Revelation, I think there's a midrash that like every letter came off of the Torah and kissed every individual Israelite, or something like that.
I haven't. That. But I think I write about in the book, the midrash of we all looked at God like a picture that's visible from all angles. And it's so similar. And it looked back on all of us. While we each have a vantage point on truth, on wisdom, on the divine, but yet, right, we need all the vantage points around that entire circumference to get the full.
I love it. All right.
But I like the kissing because it's very tender and intimate. And like, it makes me feel like God kissing each letter of the Torah and crowning the crowns in the Zohar. That's and just the delight and the love that also, I think, needs to be
and the midrashim that like that, I think are trying just to make explicit the connection you already made. They're trying to give voice to this reality of the singularity, the particularity of every human being, and the experience of unity that remains part of what makes us who we are. I want people just to understand the Jewish Studio Project. And so I wonder if you can just tell us about the work that you do. Tell us, what you're excited about, what you guys are doing right now. So kind of walk us through.
Sure. Maybe I'll just take you to my childhood a little bit just to show the origin of this work. And
please. I was going to ask you about that, but just let's go there first, if that makes more sense.
Okay, great. I think it's sort of a rare experience, but I grew up in an art studio. The art studio was the biggest room in our house growing up. I grew up in suburban Chicago with very manicured lawns, and everything was like nice and sweet and beautiful. And the studio was really the room where you could be messy and in process and weird. And
is your mom's studio?
Yeah, it was our family house, but it was because my mom is a leader in the world of art therapy. She wrote a book called Art is a Way of Knowing, Pat Allen, that has been translated into many languages. And the work that she developed called the Open Studio Process, which our work is based on and has taken into a explicitly Jewish context, is used all over the world and has been adapted in communities from Mexico to Taiwan to Turkey.
One second, my little chihuahua is barking. I don't know if you can hear that. Just one sec. I want.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry about that.
Okay.
Wow. So, oh gosh, so beautiful. I didn't realize that your mom's work was so deeply connected to yours. Gosh, that's what a beautiful added layer for you personally, and I'm sure for her.
It is. And it was interesting. She had two colleagues and they started something called the Open
Yeah.
Studio Project in Chicago. And they were all Jewish. One was a daughter of Holocaust survivors. One had become Orthodox. My mom is a convert from Catholicism. And it's interesting that Judaism was really a part of their original studio and a part of their work, but not the explicit mission or anything of what
Right.
they were doing. And I say this work was imbued in me from a young age. And then when I went to rabbinical school, all of that kind of came to bear as I felt like Judaism is so incredible. Our textual tradition, even just the Midrashim we were just quoting, right there, it's incredible. The emphasis on intellectual engagement is beautiful. And it really felt during those 6 years in the Beit Midrash, in the house of inquiry and text study, like we were leaving something on the table. It was very intellectually stimulating, and I could come up with and see other people come up with fascinating interpretations, but there wasn't a mechanism to allow that to kind of drop down and drop in and say, okay, so what does this really mean and touch on in my life? And so I started bringing the Open Studio process, which is this very simple, which I can explain, art making methodology into the Beit Midrash, saying what happens if after text study and this sort of rigorous intellectual engagement, we then drop down into a practice of intention setting.
Sorry, for two things. First of all, your mom must be felling like crazy. It's almost like the definition, not only in your own success, but the connection between her amazing work and yours. But we real quickly just tell people what a Beit Midrash is, because some folks listening might not know.
Yeah. So it literally translates as house of inquiry. And it's both the place that one might go to study Jewish text, but also the practice. It's often referred to as like the practice of studying Jewish text. And in this context, one is meant to bring their curiosity. You're meant to open up new definitions, new words, bring your curious questions. It's not about learning a thing to memorize it necessarily, but really learning it to open up new avenues of understanding within that thing.
Okay, so sorry, you were making that, you were saying that there was something missing from the traditional rabbinic process of engagement in Beit Midrash. You sensed that there was an element that wasn't there.
Yeah, and I think it's not just to say, because we were talking about consciousness before, I don't think it's particular to the Beit Midrash. I think the Beit Midrash is just showing the symptom of a larger sort of one Descartes, like mind-body dualism disconnect. And so this is really, so how do we start to reweave the DNA strands of who we are as human beings, which is intellect, but is also intuition, imagination, memory, emotion, these other things that I think we're not as practiced at like cultivating because we've so prized the intellect.
Yes.
And so for me, it's not about, I do my intellectual thing here and then I do my like emotional or spiritual or other thing here. It's like, how can we bring those back together?
Because you, for reasons we can get into, you have a sense that they're really not naturally separate. They are one and the same. And there's been a tradition for much historical reasons of thinking of them as separate. And so you're trying to create a tikkun, a healing of that.
Correct. Yeah. Thank you. And because I think damage is really done, especially when the intellect is engaged without those other parts coming into the room.
So just to loop back, and at the risk of turning us into a couple of armchair cultural critics, but just to go back to the first part of the discussion, when you were saying that creativity is a response to, or can be a response to, the current fracturing of our world. Is that part of the? Do you think the fracturing is a result of the separation of these two parts of ourselves? I'm intrigued by it, and I'm inclined to agree with you. But it's a big assertion it's a big diagnosis. Like, it's powerful, is what I'm trying to say.
And I think if we really want to go there, it's also masculine men. There's all kinds of things that have been like separated out and decided this is good, this is what's important, this is what has value and matters, here's what is like a nice to have, light, unimportant,
right, like an additive thing on the weekend, you can do this nice thing.
Correct. Like people say, oh, you do like crafts, and crafts are also, there's nothing light or like unimportant about crafts. But I think so much of our experience early on with Jewish Studio Project is adults would walk in the room, they would see art materials and be like, oh, this is for my preschooler, this is for my kid, this isn't for me.
Right. And by the way, for people who are
so-
listening right now, instead of watching, you can't see that Rabbi Allen is surrounded by gorgeous paintings. So the image kind of encapsulates everything that she's talking about. Okay, so you were on the path of explaining how you got to Jewish Studio Project and your guys' methodology and what you do.
Yeah, so the methodology is pretty simple. It's inquiry, which is Beit Midrash, some kind of engagement with text. It can be Jewish, it can be other, something that's stimulating the intellect and getting the mind going. Then you move into intention setting. What do I want to explore? What's live for me? Sometimes we think about it as what's in tension for me regarding what I just studied. Then we move into art making, which is really an exploratory process where the goal is to follow pleasure, which doesn't mean follow joy or be happy, but it means let yourself be led by the energy and your desire for what you want to do
as you're
next.
creating a thing, a piece of visual art, or necessarily, or no?
Yeah, usually what we work with, but people in our programs, especially on Zoom, are doing all different kinds of modalities in their own spaces. But really the idea is how do you get into a flow state, drop out of the intellect and just start to get into a somatic experience. And then there's the end is witnessing, which is writing in response to both the piece and the process. What do you see? What do you notice? What do you feel? Stream of consciousness, letting anything come onto the page. And then you check back in with your intention and what you originally studied and say, what, if anything, does what just happened have to do with this? And 100% of the time, things come through that you're like, oh my God, I had no idea this text, why I was so upset about this particular thing. It actually has to do with my relationship with my brother that wasn't even on my mind.
So that's where there's a really profound connection to your mother's work built into this. Correct. We're going to put in the show notes the link to your book in which you describe.
I love the little pickies.
In which you describe that process in great detail. But I think I didn't get, you've placed Beit Midrash right in the middle of what you do as the starting point almost.
Correct. And then there's a practice. The final piece of the process is that there's space for witness reading, which I just want to say explicitly is not, oh no, I'm going to talk about my piece and tell you what I did, because whenever we've experienced that, the energy in the room just goes out. It's a really ritually held space where people are invited to read some piece of what they've written out loud without any other extrapolation or explanation. So it really is, the whole experience really is held as like a ritual. I think of it as almost like tefillah, as a form of prayer or a set, there's like a matbea, right? Like a set structure like we have in prayer that you follow with set kind of rules that holds the form, so that within that held form, all kinds of things can come up and come to the surface. And then in witness reading, you get to, wow, this is what's going on for this person. And you don't have to even, often we say when people, they'll write in the language they're most comfortable with, and maybe they'll read in that language. You don't even have to understand the words the person said to feel the energetic resonance and to feel that energetic connection in the room. So I'll say that's like the grounding for what we do. That's the methodology. That's what our work is based on. And then now we're almost 11 years old as an organization. And so our work has been about how do we help activate and nurture the creative capacity across the Jewish ecosystem through this process, bringing to educators, to clergy, to lay leaders, to activists, to artists, through trainings, through thought leadership, through fellowships.
I'm curious about that. But so someone's listening, like, this sounds amazing. How can I plug into it? Would they just start by going to your website and there's online courses and packets, et cetera? So can people study with you through the online portal thing?
Yep. I lead a free monthly program called Have You Made Art About It Yet? That has hundreds of people from all over the world. And that's our global community program. There are other programs. There's a monthly Creating with the Moon that follows the cycle of the Rosh Chodesh and the moon. And then there's all kinds of articles, thought leadership, podcasts, self-paced study, in-person immersives. Actually, we're about to start one on Sunday where 18 people are coming from all over the country for a 5-day deep dive at the Berkeley. We have a brick and mortar studio here in Berkeley, California. And we have another one in Boston on the Hebrew College campus. So we have an East Coast, West Coast kind of brick and mortar, and then the virtual, and then us traveling, our whole team traveling.
Oh, incredible. So it's jewishstudioproject.org for people who want to check it out. You guys are kind of multiplying your impact by helping other organizations tap into that. How do you see to it that your idea doesn't get lost or watered down, mutated. Like that must be just personally like surrendering a little bit of control as you let this thing into the world to do its work.
Totally. Yeah, I think I maybe had that fear at first before we have a 2-year training program, and we've had a couple hundred people go through it, our facilitator training. We have an educator studio. And so really putting this methodology in the hands of folks. And then there's folks who've come to one program once and are leading it in their community. And I think what my mom has really instilled in me, which feels really true, is takes care of itself.
Right.
So open, be generous, and like it'll take care of itself. And so I really and believe that, and have been really excited to see the ways that people have adapted it to their particular contexts or communities in ways that I never could have imagined.
Well, that's so beautiful, because I think that's a real it's a real indication that it's rooted in something very real. If it can replicate itself in a good way, it means that it's starting wherever people are, it's starting at like ground zero of reality. So that's pretty cool. So I wanted to ask you about this, and to start with you kind of personally, what is happening when you, Rabbi Adina Allen, make something, a poem or a painting, or I don't know, maybe even like a sermon? What makes that act spiritual? I don't know if that's the right word, rather than just expressive.
Yeah, that's a great question. I feel like it's been a spiritual experience when I'm surprised and moved by something that came through that I didn't already know. And so it's like engaging in the page, whether it's sermon writing or a piece that I'm creating, right? Like I'm trying to work something out. There's something in the back of my head that I'm like wrestling with or struggling with, and something becomes clear through the process. So I'm just relaying the ideas that I already know and already say. You have to start there, right? You're starting with something that you know. I'm thinking about, I gave the Rosh Hashanah sermon at our synagogue in Berkeley that we're members of. And I had a really clear idea. It was about difference and unity and plurality and kind of the stuff we were talking about at the beginning. And I had no idea that Babel, the story of Babel and the Tower of Babel, was going to come into it. And the Aleph and the Bet, these two Hebrew letters and what they signified. Anyway, the sermon became this place for divine encounter, where I think an idea that was wanting to come into the world that could come through me, given what I was struggling with and wrestling with, were able to come through. And then the sermon became this art form that allowed for that expression that was both healing for me and I think very impactful for other people. And maybe you've had the same experience. Does that sound resonant to you? I wanted to ask you, when you were talking about your methodology, so people begin with the text and then they wind their way through tapping into creativity, and they make or do whatever they do. Is there an attempt to fold that back to the text, to fold whatever emerges back into the text, or it just goes where it goes? I think usually I'll prompt people when they're doing their witness writing partway through to say, check back in with your intention and or the text, and see from the place you're at now, in what, if any way, what came on the page, what you're feeling is in conversation with that. Sometimes it comes very naturally. People are weaving words and ideas from the text are just coming through in the witness, but sometimes it's like a checking back in and some kind of realization, a light goes off. Oh my God. And it's not like as obvious as one might imagine. There's a boy that I drew, and the boy, you got obsessed with the color yellow, and like you thought you were going to make a really dark thing, but it's you know what? So it's much more intuitive, metaphorical, not so on the nose.
Because you were saying earlier that it's I forgot how you put it, but like when you were quoting Einstein, that we need a new modality of thinking to solve problems that have not been solved yet. And so it's not necessarily on the nose, but it's coming through a mood, a color, whatever. Yeah.
For listeners who maybe are like, oh, I don't have an art practice, or I can't relate to this, just to say, I think it's like when you take a walk outside or you have a shower and all of a sudden you're like, oh, I had this insight or this idea, right? It's like all of these kinds of practices that allow us to let the thinking mind relax and let something else.
I was just connecting with my son about this. So to go from the very elevated to the very banal. So I've recently become very interested in learning how to repair cars in a minimal way. Yeah, I will. I think I'm one of the few rabbis in the world. I should start an organization, right? I could come and deliver a little drosh and then fix your brakes. But anyway,
pull a Josh on the brakes and why they're
see that's the Jewish studio approach to doing it. Jewish garage project. But anyway, you sometimes get in this jam where you can't fix a thing and you're trying to force this, whatever it might be. And the advice, I have a friend who does a lot of this kind of work, and he was like, you walk away from the car. It's very hard. Walk away from the car because you're going to do damage to it. But also, if you walk away, you're going to just somehow magically it'll solve itself. You'll figure out a new way and a new approach. And I was saying to my son, he makes a lot of beats in FL Studio. I don't know if you know what that is, and makes a lot of music. And he was stuck on a thing, and it's very hard for him to let go. But I was counseling him just to like step away for 20 minutes, half hour a day, whatever. And yeah, your mind shifts. Yeah.
I want just to say something about that. Often I'll put something, I have a little like altar in my studio, even just like putting something on the altar where it's like, some things, right? It's not just going to be 20 minutes or a day. It's like, there's like a big thing I can't figure out. And just to say, I can give this up to God and the creative source and say like, help me. Like, I don't know. And just to see it there and have that reminder. And then the other thing to say is
what's something, give me an example of the altar. I don't quite understand. How is it?
I'm looking over at my altar, which is why I'm looking to the right. It just has some little like objects, some stones, some, little art pieces I've made. And so I'll make a little piece or an intention or write something about someone I'm having a real time with and can't figure out what to do. And I'm like really activated and I don't know why. And I just like put it there being like, help me. And just to acknowledge like not everything is something we can just like work on. And sometimes it's like, give it up and see what source, what the universe can offer. But the other thing I was going to say is if you did I'm thinking about the car, first of all, love that. And I can't wait for the garage studio Josh Toro. We have 5 studio rules. And one of the rules is notice everything, which isn't to say you have to notice everything like a command,
everything
but more
is
like
material.
to say everything's material. It's all part of the process. So even to say, if you were to witness your experience doing that car and you're writing about it, it would be really interesting to see, why am I trying to force this? And what else in my life, not to pick on, we all have this, like, what else in my life does this relate to? And what is this drive to get it done now? And what is my like hurry? All those things. There's something there psychologically. And so I think also in our culture, there's such a focus on therapy, which like, great. I think therapy is really helpful for a lot of us, but it's like behind closed doors with a professional, we're like trying to work out these things. Whereas what if you could do that alongside other people in a community in a way that was generative?
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's right. By the way, literally, if I were to call my therapist right now and she were listening, she'd be like, do you see? Just listen to Rabbi Allen. That's exactly what I was telling you. Why is the thing stuck? You need to delve deeply into that. I love that. I'm just wondering whether there are people for who come to it, but they're very primed and trained on texts, and who experience resistance, or you experience their resistance on the next step, because I would be one of those people. So
100%.
What's that about, and how do you face it? Or how do you?
Well, first I just have to say, one of the jokes I make is we thought we take mother-daughter relationships, like religious practice and specific text and art making, and put those together, and people are going to really want to do it. It's like,
sounds like the nightmare Thanksgiving dinner or Seder dinner.
Exactly. Yeah. Like all the baggage about, but it works. Yeah. So why I made that face before was, we are a lot of times brought in to do professional development or work at a conference or work with a team or a staff or a board, where maybe the person bringing us in hired us, but everyone's not like opting in to want to do this. And what I love about this process is that each person gets to modulate their own experience, and each person has their own autonomy over what they're going to do. You don't ever have to read your witness out loud. If you want to sit with your arms crossed for the entire art making experience, I'm not going to comment on you. You do that. You want to rip your page into a million pieces and throw it on the ground. Great. Right. First of all, there's like autonomy within the experience. And I was going to say also, a lot of times people are like, you tricked me. Like, I thought this was about art, but really it's about like Judaism and religion. Or they're like, hey, I thought this was about text, but I get in touch with this whole wild side of me that, but I think for me, I grew up doing this process where text wasn't a part of it. What I found for the folks that I primarily work with in the Jewish world, the text is like a gateway that helps people find something that they're already familiar with and that feels, not for everybody, for some it's very alienating or hard or has its own, but let's say someone like you, right? You understand text, you've done this before, this feels familiar. And to start doing that in a little bit of an unfamiliar way, that kind of as a gateway leading into the rest of the process has been really effective. It helps people feel grounded and safe, and I understand this, and then go to this other place.
Man, I'll say that it's really such a beautiful idea, and I think that it's really profound. But I want to start with like a practical, personal dimension. You know, I left the Congregational Rabbinate for a bunch of reasons. One of them was I don't even know I've ever articulated this publicly. One of the reasons was that I felt I have a pretty significant textual knowledge. I love text. Text was always my orientation. But I also came to realize that those texts were not penetrating me, of all of these things of mystical experience and of how to be a mensch and all that, but they were really locked up here. And it seems like that's kind of, in a way, really one of the things you're addressing head on is how do we get this beautiful textual tradition to reorient itself to where it was supposed to be and maybe where it used to be, which is in the body and not just in the brain. Would you say that's right?
Yeah, that's beautifully said. And I think to invite us all into that process. So it isn't just the super smart rabbi who spent all these years in rabbinical school and can quote all the Kabbalah and whatever, but it's like we are actually all meant to be a part of this ongoing interpretive process. But in the ways I think it's most often offered, the only people who can meaningfully do that are people like you and me and who have all the Hebrew knowledge and and we can quote Rashi and Rambam, blah, blah, blah. And there's other ways to interpret this text and other like life experiences, wisdoms that are meant to come into conversation with it. And so this practice, I think, is both a way to allow more people to share that with us so it can also be more alive for us. I'm sick of just hearing the same people say the same things. I want to know. And I think how Torah really is an EASTSIDE, like a living, breathing tree of life, that it needs all these different nutrients coming into it. So I think it's deeply how we honor the tradition and allow it to continue to be ongoing in life. So
let me ask you this then, you know, for sure, when either I or you with your background are looking at a particular midrash, you are definitely seeing things in there that someone else is, a layperson is not. And some of those things could be just little gorgeous subtleties in the storytelling, or they could be very profoundly important ideas. How do we, as we try to grant access to the magnificence of these texts to more and more people, how do we make sure that something's not lost or flattened in that process?
Yeah, totally. I have a whole section in the book about how we approach text that hopefully can be helpful to folks. But one thing is to say, I'm seeing the Hebrew resonances and thinking about the 4 other texts that this pings on because of the Hebrew word that's being used. But someone else is seeing like, oh, from my lived experience as a woman who's had a miscarriage, like I have a whole other understanding of what this text is saying, or as a person who works on a farm, or as a person who's actually threshed wheat or whatever, all of those things. Everybody has that. And I would say what I have found most generative in our work is to take short pieces of text that don't require background knowledge and all the other things that then make it like a tiered experience. But basically taking lines, taking them somewhat out of context and just being honest about that. Of this line can be a gem in and of itself, separate from like the entire Moses narrative and everything that comes after it. And I try to give, here's what Jastrow says about this word. I try to give some of those resources there so people can play with. But I think making it smaller and bite-sized allows us to slow down and really open into it the way you might with a chant, right? Instead of like, oh God, I got to get through all of this, which is often how I felt, even Josh. There's so much material. I got to get through all of this. I got,
And that reminds me that approach is, as I'm saying this really for our listeners, that is very well established within the Jewish tradition to take a tiny little bit, completely decontextualize it. I read this gorgeous teaching yesterday from the Kotzker Rebbe that if you were to insist that it be read in context, his teaching wouldn't make any sense. It wouldn't work. But he takes the first 3 words of the Torah, totally decontextualizes them, and gives it a whole new meaning. Basically, he reads, so Bereshit bara Elohim, which I'm translating not for you, but in the beginning God created. The short version is he reinterprets it as God created the beginning, and the rest is up to us. So you in the book you talk about the connection between the studio, a Beit Midrash, which you've explained to folks what that is, and the Mishkan being the tabernacle in the Torah. That's a very beautiful part of your book. And you talk about the connection between these things. And one of the things that occurred to me, and here I'm going to sound like a fussy old Jewish rabbi, grumpy guy, like the Mishkan was a highly regulated area, right? Extremely structured, so much so that, if somebody did the wrong thing and approached the ritual in the wrong way, it was literally lethal.
Mm-hmm.
The creativity that you're asking people to encounter and to have come through them is wide open. And I'm wondering, I don't know, is there something there? I guess what I'm asking about is, so I want to go further down that road, but tell me how your thoughts about that.
I guess what it makes me think, right, the divine voice that was coming through Moses and Aaron was also kind of like wide open for what's that going to be. And it was limited. It was limited to Moses and to Aaron and to, a few. So, right, we're trying to say something different. Like that voice can come through all of us. It's not about one man at the top who's going to tell us all what to do anymore. But I do think structure and form make a difference. And so for me, like I was saying before, I think for me, that's why the Jewish studio process is there's a very clear structure with those rules of the studio. He starts talking about their witness. I'm like, I'm going to interrupt you. Please just read from the page. There's rules that need to be held so that the creative spirit can.
Oh, that's beautiful. Right. So that really does resonate. That helps me understand how you're using the Mishkan, because you're not just saying to somebody, pick up a paintbrush, book, and just do your thing. You're saying there's a container that is the way that we in this organization, in this methodology, tap into that creative dimension. Yeah, very, very powerful. So you're offering people a magnificent way to tap into creativity and to have a spiritual experience or one of divinity. Do you, in the Jewish tradition, views the divine as there's a teleology, like things are headed in a direction. It's purpose oriented. Time moves and human evolution, human history moves in a certain direction towards the good. It's traditionally understood, at least, it's not totally open-ended, right? God has a plan. Is there an end in mind in the work you do? Like, does it head somewhere? Does it? Yeah.
Yes.
Do you see what I'm asking?
I do. Although I think with the Judaism says that we're on this path. I don't know. I think some strands say that. I think there's also im mukdamu mi'achar b'Torah. There's no early or late in Torah. We're both a tradition that holds linearity of time and cyclical time into more sporadic time. And so we could go down that road. We certainly have goals as an organization, which are how do we become people that are more in touch with this incredible power inside of us? How do we become people who are more conscious of what is going on for us and able to work through that in ways that open up the blockages so that energy can flow, so that we're a culture, a people, a world that there's more peace, harmony, love, all of the things that we all want.
Sorry, I'm interrupting you, but it's because I think I've sharpened my question. So, or you really believe in creativity. You have faith in creativity 100%. That it will lead to good things.
I guess let's just take that word for a second. The atomic bomb was creative. Hitler was immensely creative. That word, creativity, I think sort of like God, it's everything, right? God has hundreds of names, right? God is shalom and peace and war. It's all there. That's consciousness is everything that the energy of the universe is all of that. It's not just good or bad, it's everything. And I think we get to determine what of that we bring through into the
Mm-hmm.
world, meaning name of God are we going to call
Mm-hmm.
forth now? And so for me and what I've learned from my mom is that's where intention
Mm-hmm.
comes through in this process. You get to open the aperture to what you're willing to bring in and bring through. And it's an iterative process where you get to see what did that intention lead to? Okay, now I'm going to refine that intention. Actually, what do I want? Actually, getting more
Yeah.
clear on that.
Yeah. I love that answer. That makes a lot of sense to me. I can't take up your whole morning. So I'm going to ask you one other question, and which you've alluded to already in the work that you're doing and trying to get your work out into the world. But just say a bit more about like how creativity can function within communal organizational structures, and what are the implications of your work for organizations, whether they're ones like Art Lab or JSP itself or synagogues. What is it that methodology offers these institutions, and what implications are there in the work that JSP does, for whether they're for arts organizations like Art Lab or JSP or synagogues or federations? Like what might come out of this work in the organizational world?
Yeah. I think it can really be used in so many different contexts. So one is, let's say, strategic planning. You're trying to figure out what direction are you going and what do you want this next iteration of the organization to be? I think just trying to think your way towards that, it's really hard to get beyond what you've already done and know into something else. And so what would it be like for a whole team to do this
Yeah.
process and kind of see what comes through? And I'll just name, it's also risky, right? Then you're opening up to creativity and what. So you can also say, we're not going to take everything that comes, or you've got to put some guidelines and boundaries around it. But what would it be like if everybody could use creative process to have some emotional regulation in the midst of really busy and intense work days? What would it be like for Jewish educators to have this process and be able to tap into the fire and love for Judaism that brought them into this work that gets so dulled, and for clergy too, that gets so dulled by the intensity, the demands, the lack of boundaries, the lack of pay, all of the things that, also need to be fixed about these roles that can help you stay tapped into that love and fire and really God connection. So what would it be like to have another spiritual practice that's deeply Jewish that isn't just liturgical prayer, as much as I love liturgical prayer? So what would it be like if we weren't all just having therapy behind closed doors and we were like working on our stuff together alongside one another also, and feeling that we're connected and a part of something bigger? And how might that mitigate this sense of extreme disconnection and isolation and loneliness? So those are just some,
and are there organizations outside of the Jewish world that you're working with?
We've trained, as I said, a bunch of people in being facilitators of this process who have brought it to Boston centers in Boston and to non-Jewish treatment centers and to nonprofits outside the Jewish world. And so what I feel excited about is like we have our particular reach and milieu, and then the more we train people, the more they can bring their unique skills and insights and have it adapt and be relevant for their community.
Wow, amazing. In a minute, I'm going to ask you our two closing questions, but I want to first of all thank you for your time, but also really, really thank you for your work. I think I didn't quite understand the profundity of it and the power of it until we had our discussion. I tapped into it a little bit in the book, but until you really articulated it, like I really think that it strikes me that in a really profound way, you're reframing the encounter with the divine. I mean, you're helping the way that you're approaching you're insisting that people not separate the two parts of the brain or whatever parts there are, or of themselves, is really like in a kind of 21st century way, bringing people back, I think, to how divinity was experienced and encountered in a previous era in ways that are really relevant. So thank you for the work. That's amazing. Sure. Okay. So what's one thing you love that you want people to know about?
You sent me this question before, and the first thing that came to mind is just like, go outside your house and notice the world. Like I was thinking of all these books I could recommend, and programs and projects, but really like one of my other deepest spiritual practices is just walking in my neighborhood and noticing like the incredible transformations of life that are happening between the cracks in the sidewalk and amidst all the like filth and whatever of city life, like also how much is like growing and blooming and dying and being reborn constantly all around us. I don't know, go outside, look outside your window. You don't have to go to some magical nature
Right.
reserve. Like it's all happening and we're
Right.
connected to it.
I
And it's
love that. As I've asked people to share something, no one has said the world. So that it makes a lot of sense. I love it. Okay. And then Rabbi Adina Allen, what is the best Jewish food?
My answer to this is, so I've been a vegetarian. I grew up in Chicago and I was forced to go to steakhouses every Sunday with my grandparents my entire upbringing, and was a vegetarian since I was age 8. And so never really fit in. Haven't eaten meat since I was 8. But I would say the best Jewish food is my mom's chicken matzo ball soup.
Oh, yeah.
And I eat the chicken, but I drink the broth and have the matzo balls. And I love the dichotomy and the contradiction of that. And so I'll offer that to you.
So that's like an annual, what's the word?
Like a Rosh Hashanah, Passover.
You'll allow yourself that one indulgence. Yeah. That's so sweet. Well,
let's not hold too tightly to our tightly held beliefs.
Yeah, I love it. Well, listen, your work honors your mother's work, and so it makes sense that you would you'd go back to the chicken soup that Mama made. Rabbi, thank you so much. We're so excited to have you up here, and it's going to be great. I'm excited to meet you in 3 dimensions, and we'll have links to that information in the show notes. And I just want to thank you again so much for your work and for your time.
Thanks for the
All right, take care. Be well. Bye.